Hey, Sparkle Squad. Welcome to another episode of Sparkle Saturdays. I am your favorite life transformation specialist, Kimberly Braxton, and I help women, specifically Black women, reclaim their lives, set empowering boundaries, and master self care rituals. And today's show is all about the men, ladies. This is our first time having a show that's speaking more to the men. However, we are going to talk about how we can support men in their mental health for the men in our lives. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Aaron Jones on the show today. So we're going to get right into it. So I know you told me to call you Aaron, so I want to make sure that's clear so everybody doesn't like, why you're not calling him doctor. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So he's giving me the right of way to say Aaron. Okay, so Aaron, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure. Yes, I prefer the Aaron tag. When I logged into the app, it asked me what name I wanted to be displayed, and I was very intentional about choosing Aaron. I am a doctor of education. I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. But I really only drop the doctor when I'm trying to get a dinner reservation or perhaps get an upgrade on the airline. But just Aaron is fine. My name is Aaron Jones. I come to you by way of Virginia. Actually, I was born in Lynchburg, Virginia, but spent a lot of time in the mid-Atlantic states, Maryland, the Carolinas, but spent the majority of my life in Pennsylvania. I'm a father to Xavier and Skylar. I'm a husband to Carmen. I'm a brother to Jasmine, and I'm a son to George and Sharon. I'm an athlete. I am a counselor to many. Just an easygoing, fun-loving, artsy fartsy school-based counselor. I do spend a little bit of time at the university level as well. I've had the privilege of teaching at two universities. At Newman University, a small Catholic school out in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I taught two courses. One course was on closing the achievement gap, and the other one was associated on social emotional learning in the classroom. My most recent position is at St. Joseph's University, where I teach a course called Global Perspectives in Educational Leadership. I teach that to doctoral students, which I really, really enjoy. Here at the American School of Doha is where I'm at currently and where I am visiting with you now. I'm a school counselor, but I've worn many hats here in addition to being a school counselor. I was once the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Social Justice curriculum coach, where I created a protocol where I assessed our curriculum, trying to decolonize, if you will, our curriculum, helping our teachers be more explicit and making connections to those words that I mentioned previously. So that was very challenging but very rewarding work. I was part of the accreditation committee, going or a 5-year review for the New England Association of Schools, spending a lot of time in classrooms, leading learning principles, presenting at conferences, publishing papers, just your neighborhood friendly scholar, just trying to make it those.
Trying to educate those about the importance of inclusion, diversity, mental health, because I heard social emotional learning in there.
Yes.
We got a lot in common. Okay, so I was born in Pittsburgh. Okay,
No.
yes, I was born in McKeesport. Well, McKeesport, but I was born there. I grew up in Gaithersburg and Rockville. Eventually made my way to Baltimore, went to Virginia Union.
No
So
way.
I lived in Richmond for a long time. And yeah, we got a lot in common.
Wow, yeah.
I know about Lynchburg too. I know about Lynchburg.
Wow.
I've visited. So
Cool. Real cool. Real cool.
yeah. And social emotional learning is my jam. Like in the classroom, I believe that relationships, that's the gateway to rigor, right?
Hmm.
So I am that's my jam, social emotional learning. So let me ask you, how did you become interested in mental health?
Okay. Well, it's kind of the family business, honestly. Um, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather had a church. His first church was in Amherst, Virginia. And so that's sort of where I came into the picture. My parents wanted to be close to my mom's parents. And then, just watching my grandfather minister to his flock. Um, on the Southern Baptist bulletin, if you will, there's always a sick and shut-in portion of it.
Mhm.
And so ministering, that was a very important to my grandfather, watching him and actually literally going with him to people's homes and to hospitals, as like I said, as he looked after his flock, which was very I guess transformative to me. You're not really sure where your life's going to go, or the lessons that you learn, or even the things that are going to stick with you. And then my parents, they're in private practice. They have their own mental health facility called GNS Counseling in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So my mom does a lot of group work. My dad does more of the group stuff, but my mom works with women, children, couples. And so it's really important to them that even though that they've had quite a bit of success in their lives, that they stayed in the community that we know, East Liberty, Wilkinsburg, so the east side of Pittsburgh. I'm sure you know this. And
Mhm.
so they really wanted other young Black people to see professional Black people not leaving the community once they've established some level of success. So that was really important to them. But I guess it wasn't important enough for me to hop on a plane and go across the ocean. But yeah, I guess that's where it's come from. Just family thing, always putting yourself after others, putting others before you, and sort of the way I've grown up.
It sounds like it's in your blood.
Oh yeah,
Counseling's in your blood.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's awesome. So, what are some of the common mental health issues that men face, but specifically Black men? If you could speak to that, and how do they typically manifest?
Yeah. Well, let me take a step back a little bit. My academic research centers on a theory from Yuri Brofenbrenner. It's called ecological systems theory. So just go with me for a second, if you will. Um, ecological systems theory is like nested dolls. So there are these five systems, but they all build on one another. So like the micro system is really just your immediate environment, like your family, places where the individual has direct contact with: schools, family, workplace. And then you have your mesosystem, and that is the interconnectedness between the different systems. So what's the relationship between work and school, like school and home, your coach and home, right? So what is the relationship between those two different things, or the combination of those? And then outside of that, you have the larger social system, right? And then on top of that, you have the broader cultural context. And then you have, of course, the last thing is the time continuum. So when you think about mental health, at least the way I think about mental health is it's really hard to separate it from the context or the many environments that you engage in, as well as the relationship between those particular environments. So as a Black man who spent a lot of his youth in the Black church, my relationships have a different sort of tone. And then how was the Black church viewed as a community as a whole, or in the greater DC area where my grandfather was ministering? And then, of course, what is the overarching politics of DC, which when I was there in the 90s, the peak of the crack epidemic. And so how those things may manifest in my own life. So you asked about men and men's mental health. Again, I think it's contextual. And so the two, I guess, governing bodies over health and well-being, I found two definitions that I thought were quite interesting. The CDC talks about our emotional psychological well-being, but the WHO takes it a step further, which I think is really, really important to men. It talks about it enables people to cope with their stresses of life,
Mm.
realize their abilities to learn and work well, and their ability to contribute, which I think is the thing that is most underpinning a man's need to exist in the world, and the ways in which they can contribute, whether that be to their families, to their societies, or their communities as a whole. So I don't think that men, especially Black men, are different than any other man. I think that we are suffering from anxiety and depression at the same rates as others, but there are some other traumatic informed or based illnesses like PTSD, which I think is really not really talked about in the Black community. I myself personally, I'm going to be referencing myself because I don't want to dare to speak on behalf of all men. Um,
Right.
but I had a lot of loss as a young man. Like I said, growing up in the DC in the early '90s and Pittsburgh in the '90s, where gangs were really prevalent, I had many of my friends murdered, and so that trauma of loss of life is something that I think Black men deal with, especially in urban areas, quite a bit. This undiagnosed PTSD, that is something that I think is one illness that we, as a community, as mental health providers, perhaps should consider learning more about and understanding the context in which PTS can flourish, or in this case, paralyze and cripple men, especially Black men.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you talk about like that type of trauma. I taught in DC for 3 years at Ron Brown College Preparatory High School, which is like the second of its kind in the country, all Black male high school, public high
Mhm,
school. And like one of my students witnessed a murder on the way, just walking to school.
mhm.
Like he witnessed someone get shot in the head. And he was scared to come back to school after that. Like,
You're to
are they
leave the
going
house after
to
that.
get me next? They saw me. They know I saw them. So that stress, that trauma, a lot of times, like you said, it goes without any type of treatment. You know, I would bet some money that he probably did not get any counseling after that. You know, I mean, luckily he went to that school where social emotional learning is built in throughout the curriculum, right? To address these types of things, and um, but that post traumatic stress that's a big deal, especially for Black men. Even there are studies now showing that racist incidents cause post traumatic stress, and
Absolutely.
who gets treated for like you deal with the racism and you keep moving day through day by day, but it's still going untreated.
And I think that that's part of the Black experience, right? A lot of times Black men who, from the day that they stepped foot on, in America at least, our worth was determined by how productive we could be, right? And so again, this ability to contribute in the ways in which we're able to contribute largely impacts the way we see the world. We talk about these different systems, right? How we engage in our different environments, right? And so if you are a young man and you've witnessed a murder on your way to school, how does that impact, one, how you want to even leave the house? What does that mean for the relationships that you could have with your peers? What if you want to have a family? How are you now going to parent to your own flock, right? And so this is the cycle of mental health. We talk a lot about being predisposed to different diagnoses, but oftentimes, in my opinion, I don't think it's talked about the similarity in experience attributes to certain mental health or mental diagnoses being able to flourish, I suppose, or
Mhm.
trigger whatever terminology you like to use there. So interesting stuff, sad stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah, very sad, very sad. Well, when you were describing what is it, ecological.
Ecological systems theory.
Okay, thank you, because I was like trying to remember it. I kept thinking about, do you remember those Russian dolls where you
Exactly.
open one and it's like layers, right?
Exactly.
Or even thinking about an onion, peeling away like these layers that that may have affected us in some way, getting to the root of whatever it is. But I just kept thinking about the Russian doll. Like you keep opening one and then there's another one that's smaller, that's what I
Exactly.
was thinking about when you were describing that.
That is exactly what I use when I'm teaching it to my students. That's the example. I literally put up a, a set of Russian nested dolls on the screen and use it
Hmm.
to explain for sure. I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I'm gonna look more into that to that theory. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
So let's get into this next one. Like what are the signs that may indicate that men or people in general, but men need to seek professional help? Like maybe go to counseling or therapy or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I think the biggest determining factor of when, because let's start at the beginning. I don't think that you could go through life um, anywhere, America aside, and not be dealing with something, right? I think in a lot of ways, life is traumatic in and of itself. And the ability to live life on life's terms, it is what it is. I think that's what the kids say, life be lifing.
Yeah.
But I think it becomes problematic when you aren't able to do what's necessary in your life, right? And so if your feelings are starting to get to a point where it's going to impact negatively your ability to be a student or to go and be a working professional in any way that you aren't able to contribute, I think that's really, really important in a way that's
Mm,
productive. Is probably the time where you want to seek some help.
okay. So when a person is to the point where they're not feeling like they can contribute
I think, at
effectively.
least, I think
Mhm.
for a man at least, right? And so sometimes that looks like isolation, right? And you might have a hard day, and you just might want 10 or 15 minutes of solitude, right? Do you go to your room and shut the door? But are you in there so long that now you're no longer contributing to the family? Like, are you
Mm, okay.
withholding yourself from your kids? Because I think again, or are you so depressed that you can't even get out of bed to go to work, right? So again, your ability to contribute to whatever your work is required, right?
Mhm.
And so I think again, are you so anxious that it keeps you from making or maintaining your relationships? Are you so fearful of the world in which, like the young man you spoke of, that now you can't even
Mhm.
go outside, right? And so,
Right.
when at the point where it starts to become detrimental to other
Okay.
aspects of your life, I think that's when probably time to get some more help.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So let's talk about this next question.
Okay.
So, why do you think there's a stigma around men, specifically men? Because I think the stigma exists for everybody, especially in our community. But we're talking about men. Like, why do you think there's a stigma around men seeking help for their mental health issues? And how can we overcome this stigma?
Ooh, I think the answer, in my opinion, is quite clear as to why. The how, though, is where it gets really in the mud, so to speak. So I'm going to go back to Brofenbrenner, and so his last ring, or the outermost system, is the time continuum. And so here we are in the year of our Lord, 2024. We are starting to get to a place where a man can show his sensitivities, right? When you
Right.
think back 100 years ago, we didn't even have the language to talk in these terms, right? And so, as a man, first, in my opinion, the idea of what it means to be a man, depending upon when you're defining it, matters, right? Like in 2024, a man can be whoever says they're a man, right? That wasn't the case, 10 years ago. That wasn't the case 100 years ago, right? And so the contextual sort of aspects of manhood and what that means, in my opinion, is what hampers or contributes to mental health festering, because it's very risky to be vulnerable. Again, environment, right? If you are an inner city Black boy and you are peer weak or timid, you're going to have a very hard time, right? So these are the lessons that you learn indirectly through various experiences, right? You may be shy yourself, but you notice another shy kid was a bit perhaps more courageous in sharing his shyness, get absolutely tormented. And so now he's learned that I'm not going to show that anymore, right? Maybe you took a risk with a young lady and you were vulnerable. And maybe that lady's definition of manhood was in conflict. And so you are now rebuffed by the woman because her definition of manhood was different than how perhaps this one gentleman wanted to express that, right? So I think the context in which masculinity exists is the reason why it's so hard to say it's right, but that's also the reason why it continues to spiral out of control. So I think firstly identifying it, but then it's the how. It's like, how do we get to a point in society where men can be vulnerable, can say that I'm lonely, can say that I'm depressed, because and a lot of times a man still needs to go to work, still needs to earn, still needs to provide, right? And so these these roles, these responsibilities become, with being a man, sometimes are in conflict with a mental health breakdown. Maybe it's an acute situation, maybe it's more profound. It's a very nebulous and confusing web, so to speak, of mental health and living and thriving. And yeah, context matters. Like, I'm in the Middle East, right? So mental health, like, what does that mean, right? What does that mean in sub-Saharan Africa? What does that
Right.
mean in Asia? What does that mean in South America, right? So like, it looks different everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So me being here in, I'm currently in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. You're in Qatar in Doha, and there's certain things that, like, Tara, who's our school counselor, there's certain things she just can't say. There's certain things she can't say. Certain things she can't celebrate
Hmm.
because of because of the culture, right, of
Right.
where we live. Within my own home, right? I have a son, he's 28 years old. His name is Miles. One of the things that I said early on when he was young, if he wants to cry, it's okay, because I didn't want that macho bravado put on him, like, oh boy, don't cry, man up,
Hmm.
no. If he wants to cry, he can cry. It's I don't even know, because I was at a very unhealthy state at this time. Like, I was at the height of my codependency, okay? But I knew that raising a young black boy, that was important, that we not stifle his emotion. If he wants to cry, it's just a release. I mean, it's human to cry,
Hmm.
right? Why do we dehumanize that for men? Like, so yeah, I just thought that was very important, for my son growing up.
I love that for him. I love that for you. I think that that's wise. I think what's most important for a young person from a developmental standpoint is, you talk about this microsystem, right? In your home, right? Can you be you? And I think that that's the roots of a lot of people's mental anguish, right?
Mhm.
They aren't even at home as a young man, because we're talking about men, haven't been given the opportunity to be, right? And it's not more complicated than that, honestly. Um, if you have a young boy that is very emotive, and you start to reprimand him for emoting, guess what he's going to do? He's not going to emote anymore, right? And then
Right.
and what is that going to look like in 10 or 15 years when he doesn't know how to emote, or
Mhm.
um, it builds up and now maybe it's explosive, right? And so all of these things that come from, again, one's ability or not to just exist in a way that they came into the world. Yeah, I don't think we need to overcomplicate it.
Yeah, I love that. Providing a space where young men can just be, right?
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's extremely important. I think we addressed all of that question. It was like a two-part question. Um, so this is a great question to go into now because we kind of segued into it already. But how can we create more open environments for men to discuss their mental health without fear of judgment?
Well, I'll give a hot take here. I think those spaces already exist, but I don't think. I think the brilliance of Blackness is our creativity and our resourcefulness. Um, and I think, for example, those, like I said, those spaces already exist. For example, the barbershop. It is such a special place for many reasons. And again, your one's ability to be, I think, is somewhere that you can be in the barbershop, like gay guys come into barbershops, women come into barbershops. We're talking about sports. People are talking about the trouble at the workplace. They're talking about the trouble at home, right? Like, and like, I think those spaces exist. Now, are we naming them? Maybe we're not naming them in a way that is conducive or reflective of the conversation that we're having, but I think that we've always had those spaces where men can feel supported by other men. I think that's really an important bit of it as well. So I don't think we need to recreate the wheel. I just think that we need maybe more of those spaces, right? I don't. So if we're using a barbershop example, right? I don't know if we need 1,000 barbershops, but we need, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think we need to. I don't think we need more. I think they already exist.
Got you. I mean, and that makes sense. Like, yeah, you made me think about the movie Barbershop because
Right.
they said, "Yay, there is everything. It's no limits on what we can talk about here in the barbershop. It's the barbershop, and yeah, you're right. Those spaces do exist. I would definitely love to see more. Here they just opened. It's called Bad and Bougie Hair Salon,
Uh-oh.
and it's the space is amazing, okay? But they have a barbershop. It's probably the first unisex black owned salon here like this. But they have a space for the barbershop and they have a space for, the women to get their hair done too. And it's yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a safe space where men can come and get
Yeah.
whatever they need to get off their chest.
And I think that just to take it a step further, like I said, I played sports. I was blessed enough to come from a very talented athletic family. My grandfather was one of the first Black football players at Purdue University. My
Oh,
uncle won a national championship in the '70s, and so I also went and played Division I football. And like the locker room is one of those spaces, right? My grandfather was also a Q dog, um,
okay.
also a Mason, right? I'm not in a fraternity, but I would imagine similar things happen, especially on those lines. You hear people talk about the people they went over with, and I remember my grandfather and my uncle being in touch with the guys in their frat, until they left this world, right? When they passed away, like it was their frat brothers, not only the guys who were Mega Sci-Fi, but the Masons, and like, and so again, I think those spaces already exist. We have always supported one another, because I think that, again, as a Black man in America, at least, our survival depended on it. And so I think that
Mhm.
we've always supported each other, but I think just now, in the last 10 or 15 years, you're seeing more of that. It's the reason why that school exists in DC, right?
Yeah,
Black men,
exactly.
Black men, right? Like we've always held those spaces for one another. And so, like I said, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think just now we're starting to be more aware of those spaces, which is a beautiful thing also.
Yeah. Perhaps, men just need to tap into those spaces more.
I don't think I see, I don't know, man. I really, I know we're talking about men, right? I get it.
Mhm.
But I don't think that they're not, you know?
Okay.
I think that everyone's on a different path. They're on a different part of the journey. Everyone's on the same journey, right? Um, and I think that people are willing to share as much about themselves as they feel comfortable with. Um, but because I'm more open about it doesn't mean that the person next to me should be or needs to be. Um, but you sort of have like this. Even I notice it abroad too. It's just like that head nod between black men is a real thing. It's just like, I see you, like, you good? We don't have to go into it. We don't have to name it in the ways that perhaps that we're doing here, but like I and maybe I'm blessed to have a wonderful group of guys but just the guys that I run with would never see another man struggling and not give a genuine like you good, like, and not just the passing like, yo, you good, like, but mean it, and so
Right.
I, again, I can't, and I wouldn't dare or dream to speak of all men, but I think we're doing okay. I think we're doing okay.
Okay. All right. So we have those spaces. So let's talk about this part right here. This is for the Sparkle Squad, right?
Okay.
This whole conversation is really for men and women. However, this question I think is really for my Sparkle Squad. So, how can women effectively support the mental health of the men in their lives? Like, what can we do? What are some practical things we can do for our uncles, our brothers, our cousins, whoever in our lives?
I think you guys have to be careful what you ask for. I think what I hear from the women in my life is they want me to be more communicative and more open. The women, especially I think about my little cousins who are at a very exciting time in their life. They're recent university grads. They're just getting their first jobs. They're dating. They're out in the world, right? And what my one cousin said to me was, I don't want to be a therapist to any suitor, right? You need to work that out in therapy. And I thought that was a really interesting take. But what I know about relationships is sometimes you have to be willing to be vulnerable with your partner, right? And so, again, this is where I think this idea of masculinity and femininity plays a part, right? Because it takes a very comfortable man to go to his wife or his partner and say that I'm struggling, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm lonely. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And so, for the women who are speaking or listening here to our conversation today, if you want an emotionally available man, you better be ready when when they appear, when they darken your doorstep. If they take the risk to be vulnerable with you and you rebuff them, they don't feel supported by you, that door is closed forever. And so what I want for the women who are listening here is, it's, this, and I'm not trying to diminish the experience of women, but since we're talking about men, I want to talk about men, right? Like, it's
Right.
hard to be a man in this world because life throws different curveballs to men, and black men in particular, that don't come in the way of black women. Now, again, I'm not trying to diminish the experience of black women. We love you all. We know you guys are the bringers of life, and there's nothing more important than that. But in order to support us, again, at home, we need to be able to exist in our completeness. And if you are um, unwilling or unprepared to see a man at his weakest, there's nothing that I can do to help you prepare for that. But since we're talking about how to support black men, I think that the best way that you can support Black men is be ready to support when we take the risk to be vulnerable to you and ask for it.
Wow, that's really powerful. Because first of all, when you said it takes a lot of courage just to say, look, I'm struggling with whatever it is, and to be, like you said, rebuffed once that's shared it's that's a rough place, and I don't know how you can come back from that.
Yeah. It's being authentic. I heard someone say authenticity is a trap, and I thought that that was brilliant in its simplicity, because we talk about um, being real and saying your piece. Um, and sometimes in your relationship, if you tell your partner what they're doing is contributing to your unhappiness or your unwellness, that, that's a hard conversation, you know?
Hmm. I've had
And
to have them. I've
that's
had
tough,
to have those conversations myself. Okay, so yeah, it is hard.
So, like I said, again, would never love Black women. My mom's one, my wife's one, I'm raising one, right? And so I would never try to diminish the experience of Black women. I really think that it takes, we talk about codependency, right? Like people like to think, or you hear colloquially, like, you complete me, right? And that's like the complete wrong way to go about it, right? Like you need two wholes to come together to make another whole, right? Like, and so, yeah, just be careful what you ask for. That's all. That's all I can say.
Yes.
If
But
you like,
one of the things you said though, I really, really want, I hope that the listeners have jotted it down. Like, for to be in one's home, they should be able to be exist in their completeness. That's so important. Like, I'm going to write that down somewhere myself, because you know I feel like it's not a home if you can't. Like,
yeah, but that's the thing about relationships, though, right? Like people, and I know we're not talking about relationships here, but I think a lot of times relationships, whether it be romantic or not, they in some ways they do contribute to your mental health, right? But when you choose a partner, um, the way in which we choose our partners sometimes are reflective of the society we live in and our actual values, right? And so, this idea of the importance of reflection, um, the the courage it takes to be honest with yourself. I'm talking to the men now, like be honest with myself as a man. What Who am I? What do I value myself? And then of course, what am I looking for in a partner? Um, and sticking to that. It's really, really hard to do that because you get the signs from society that, you need a woman that looks like this, that got these measurements, you know what I mean? Or
mhm.
um, and the same is true for the women, right? They need to be a certain height. They need to earn a certain amount of money. You know what I mean? They need the beard. They need the hairline intact, right? Like all these things that are nice to have, but I don't know if they're needs to have, right? And so
Right.
I am not. I don't want to be confused here. I'm not asking anyone to settle, right? I think that everyone should get what they deserve and what they're worth. Um, but with that, you can't minimize the the mental health aspect of it, or the identity, the person, the whole person, right? And all of their defects of character, all of their shortcomings, and all of the potential as well.
Hmm. It's very interesting that you brought that up, because like a few years ago, I made a list, right? God says, write the vision, make it plain. So I
Mm.
made a list of what I wanted in my next husband, because I'm happily divorced right now. And looks and height and money, a lot of this stuff was like I don't even know if some of it made the list. Like for me, it's like I need somebody that is emotionally mature, like someone who's going to take care of me emotionally, someone, who will treat me well. Like these are the things that were on my list. Nothing like appearance, none of that even made the list,
But I
you
think
know,
that you have had the life is the best teacher, right?
that part. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I love that. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about self-care. So can you share, like, because I know that's just as important for men as it. That's something I talk to the Sparkle Sisters about all the time. Like my Sparkle Squad, we talk about self care all the time. We had a whole Galentine's event on self care
That's
for
cool.
Valentine's, that month. So can you share some self care practices that men can incorporate into their daily routine to maintain good mental
Sure,
health?
sure. My mentor once told me the key to a happy life is to do three things each and every single day. That is to do something physical, something spiritual, and something intellectual. And I think if you do each of those things every single day, you're going to be a better person for it. For me, one of the things that I love to do is to train really, really hard. I push my body um, hard most days of the week. I'm up early, usually during the school year. My alarm goes off at 4:30. I'm one of those type of people. Um, but the thing that's really interesting about training hard is you don't actually get hard in the gym. Like you don't get stronger when you're actually pushing the weight. You get stronger when you recover. And I think that that's the hit about mental health
Mm.
and mental clarity. It's like, how do you recover from life? What are you going to do? What's that thing that you're going to do that's the spiritual component that's going to ground you? What is the intellectual bit that you're going to do to learn to be better or to contribute in a different way? And so for me, I love to read. I journal. I don't often go far without having some place to write. Like these are just like I'm at my office, so like these are my professional ruminations, if you will, but I have my own personal ones as well. So I would encourage all the men out there to get out of your head and get it down on paper, because that literally clear space in your head. You don't have to keep it in your short term memory. If you
Mm.
get it down on paper, again, risky because snooping eyes and all of these things, right? To pour out your most innermost thoughts into somewhere where other people can read them. But again, I'm this is why I'm so thankful for my wife, because she understands me, and she gives me the space to do that. To I'm going to bed early. I know you want to sit down here and watch Bridgerton right now, but my alarm's going off at 4:30 in the morning, and so the space to be able to go to bed early. Um, I am so appreciative of her for allowing me to do what I need to do so I can be a better husband and father. And that's the give and take that I think is important in a partnership.
I love that. So do something, three things every day. Do something physical, spiritual, and intellectual
Every single
to
day.
maintain this that self-care, to
To
maintain it.
recover, right? I think it's this the
Mhm.
recovery point that I think is so
Yes,
important,
I was getting to that next. That when you said that, you get stronger when you recover. Because I have been in recovery for I don't even since 2010 for codependency. And yeah, that resonated with me when you said it because I did get stronger. I got stronger boundaries when I started to recover, from the codependent behaviors. I started speaking up for myself. Like I grew in so many ways. I definitely got stronger when I started recovering. and I'm
Mhm.
still in recovery. I never say I'm finished because you know how that goes
Absolutely.
with anybody in 12-step programs. So yeah, but I love that. You get stronger when you recover. That's really powerful.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and get into this next question. So, what resources or support networks do you recommend for men who are struggling with their mental health and need additional help? Let me just say this real quick though, because what I got from going to recovery that was free, FREEE, free,
Mhm.
was like so powerful. I know at the time when I started recovery, my insurance only covered like 3 mental health visits, like to a therapist. But I was able to go to if I wanted to, I could have gone to a recovery meeting every night of the week.
Mhm.
And what I got from step study, oh my gosh, like it changed my whole life. It
Mhm.
bettered my relationships, like everything. So I'm always going to advocate for working with a coach
Yep.
or working with a recovery, some type of recovery program.
I would echo that.
Okay.
You know, this is the question that I struggle with the most, um,
Okay.
because I haven't been asked that question before,
Hmm.
um, and my clientele, like the people I am in that I work with, are young people, right? And so,
Okay.
um, so if I were to talking to another man about where they might go to get help, I don't know. And this is me being vulnerable. I hate not knowing. And it takes a lot of courage for me to say that I don't know. What I think, though, is exactly what you said is number one, starting with your insurance provider, just seeing what you're eligible for, and starting there. Have parents who work in the field, and friends who are also in the field working as therapists. I know that, especially for Black men, they will make it work. Um, I think that it's always good to have a starting place,
Hmm.
um, but then the make referrals in the community to community-based providers. I'm fortunate enough to be a part of a collective of Black counselors around the world, and I can definitely share that with you, so you can share that with your audience. And what we're trying to do is build a database of mental health providers around the world. I know that this exists in other forms in
Yeah.
America, and so I think the internet is also your best friend here. But what I know also to be true is that you can't be discouraged. I think a Google search will uncover a lot of providers. But what did I say? The odds are good, but the goods are odd. And I think that sometimes it's going to require you to meet with one, two, three, four, maybe counselors before you find one that you actually connect with. And that's okay too.
Hmm.
So if that's worth anything, that's what I got.
No, it definitely is. I mean, starting with your provider first, your insurance provider, and then working from there, absolutely. Because maybe people don't even know that they have access to a certain amount of therapy sessions, you know? So I think that's really important. What is your take though on working with or seeking out specifically a Black provider?
I would recommend it. Not at the cost of not having anyone though, right? Like I think a therapist, a coach is better than no coach. I think that you get someone that you connect with and start doing the work as quickly as you can, and then hopefully, if I mean maybe it works out in that relationship. But I think that there's something to be said for having, because the context matters, right? And I keep coming back to my man Bronfenbrenner, like a white person will never know what it was like living as a Black person in this world, right?
Right.
It don't really
Right.
matter the time interval there, but like in the last 30 or 40 years, it's been incredible progress, right? But we still have had these touch points where um, Black men have found themselves, for lack of a better word, hunted, I would say. Um, and have a therapist or a coach that knows what it's like to walk through the world in a brown body. y- you don't have to explain as much, right? You have an immediate thing in common. You have a shorthand, if you will, um, that really allows you to cut, like you said, the layers of the onion, peel those back pretty quickly, to get to what is actually the essence. So again, I think my take is if you can find it, definitely do it. Um, but I realized, like I said, it's better to have someone than no one. So if you have an able and quality provider at the ready, I would say take that. And then if you can come across someone later, then for sure make a switch if you can, if it makes sense, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So, do you have any parting advice, um, for us regarding mental health?
Read. Um, I think we are at an interesting time where information has never been easier to get or to have access to. I know that that cuts both ways because you don't quite understand or know perhaps the quality of the information that you're receiving. Um, but I think that that's a starting point. So get in the books, read up, journal up, and don't be afraid to be and spend your time in your relationships with the people that support or encourage that, and know that you're not alone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Um, and I would like to add one thing to that.
Please.
Um, Definitely find your safe people. Like, at least have one or two safe people. And when I say safe, that means that they don't judge you, right? They're active listeners, and they're going to keep whatever you share confidential. Like, I think everyone should have at least two safe people in their lives that they could go to when they need to go, to talk to someone.
Yeah, I agreed. Quality over quantity, that's for sure.
Mhm. Yes. Okay, so Erin, how can people keep up with you?
I am not like my millennial peers. I am not a big social media person. I'm there.
Okay.
You can find me on Facebook at my first and last name, Aaron Jones. On Facebook, on Instagram, I'm at 24AJ. I am pretty easy to find. I have a common name, but you probably see the Dr. J tag associated with that. Yeah, reach out. Don't be a stranger. And if I don't know the answer, I definitely can get it for you. So don't be shy out there. Yeah, looking forward to connecting with anyone who would like to connect.
Thank you so much. And so we'll add the resources that I think it was a directory you had mentioned.
Yes.
We'll add that resource in the show notes. So just check
Okay.
in the show notes for that resource. And before we go, I know you said read. Do you have any book recommendations that, like,
Yes.
if someone was wanted to just whatever, like learn more about mental health or whatever you think might be helpful?
Yes, I read a book just recently that I was riveting. I'm just Googled it. It's called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. Lost Connections: Uncovering the Real Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Solutions. Check out that book, which was a great read. Another one is The Body Keeps Count, which was a good one. Uh,
Ooh, I think I heard about that one.
it's a really good book. So, and then if you were to, again, I love the internet. Chat GPT, friends, don't be afraid to use the technology. You could say, I really enjoyed. Lost Connections by Johan Hari. What are some other books that are similar? It will give 100 books back to you. So I think if you read those two books to start, I think that you'd be well on your way to perhaps learning something new, maybe about yourself or about someone you love.
Thank you so much. So we'll add those also to the show notes. All right. So thank you for taking your time to speak with me and my Spucker Squad. And I think this has been a very valuable, beneficial conversation. And I really pray that everyone gets whatever they need from this and more, right?
Of
So
course.
thank you so much. And everyone, remember that you can follow Grow Inspire Sparkle on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And you can also go to the website if you want to learn more, growinspiresparkle.com. Thank you so much for joining today. Bye. We'll see you in the next Sparkle Saturdays.